Hey everybody, welcome back aboard Spaceship Kyle. This is actually my second time trying to make this video, and I don't want to get too tinfoil hatty. I spent 45 minutes talking about this stuff, and the audio was just completely messed up. It was chopping in and out. I'll show you a little sample here. It sounded like that. I record these on OBS and then I put them up on YouTube. I use an external audio capture device thing, so I think it's a technical issue. But no, X-File music play. The conspiracy. They didn't want you to know what I had to tell you. So needless to say, I have to start this video from the beginning, and I'm a little bit frustrated. And so I'm not going to do exactly what I did in the first one. The first one, I basically went through the options of who's flying these craft or what's controlling these craft that are being reported and about to be shared to Congress sometime before June 25th. In my first video, I speculated about maybe some of the technologies behind them, what they could mean, and I promised in my next video I'd theorize who these things might be. And so in my initial recording, I went from, okay, here's the base level of the least out there explanation of, okay, it's all, if not a hoax, at least explainable by science and terminology that we know today. I went from there all the way up to the most out there explanations I can think of. Everything is the same consciousness lit up into a fractal of itself, and that's what all these things are. So that was my first video. It was interesting. I might try it again another time, but I'm still kind of licking my wounds from the loss of that recording. Instead, I've been reading around, and I'm just really fascinated by Tom DeLonge. I don't know if I trust him. I don't know if he has any idea what he's talking about. He has surrounded himself with some very interesting people, and his company To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. Like it or not, years ago we all laughed at Tom DeLonge, but he's been kind of at the center of a lot of these recent releases and things. And if not him directly, people that he's been working with. And I didn't really know what he thought and what he believed. So I'm going to dive in here to this. I'm going to dive into this Reddit post. This was from 2 years ago. If you're already really into UFOs and stuff, UAP, whatever you want to call them, you've probably already seen this. But let's review, okay? And think some of these things out, because it gets pretty, what I would call, out there, nutty. And this is the lead singer of Blink-182. Claiming to have all these connections in government and whatnot, and the things that he believes. I just want to process it. That's it. So that's what this video is going to be. So this is a Reddit post from a couple of years back. And even at the time, it was a repost. So repost, paraphrase notes on Tom DeLonge's March 27th, 2016 interview with George Knapp on Coast to Coast AM. Coast to Coast AM is what originally, I think, really began my rabbit hole of being interested in UFO stuff. I gave up on it for a few years. Just kind of, it was, I don't know, I didn't feel like it was going anywhere. And recently I can't help but get drawn back in. So let's hop in. They have a quote at the top that says, they call them the others. They're gods with a little g. Tom DeLonge. So that's where we're going with it. Like it or not, love it or hate it, that's where we're going. So somebody says, that's right. They listened to the whole 4-hour exchange. Been a good portion of their weekend translating what Tom DeLonge said. We're just going to walk through it point by point. So I don't know who the original poster was. This is taking from a post by Kiwi Bonga on Reddit. So if anybody knows who the original poster was, or anything like that, or if the original poster would like me to credit them on this little YouTube video, let me know. So point number 1, in the first hour, Tom DeLonge talks about a personal experience he had while camping in the desert with an unnamed ufologist who developed a certain method to summon UFOs through a meditation protocol. During the night, he and another guy in the tent with him were woken up in sleep paralysis by a multitude of voices talking all around the tent. Somehow they went back to sleep after being artificially convinced that nothing weird was happening. They corroborated their stories the next day. Later on, he stumbled upon a book on Jeremy Corbell's Instagram, Operation Trojan Horse by John Keel from 1970, where a similar occurrence is described. Jeremy Corbell, if you're new to this whole thing, he's the filmmaker who made the Bob Lazar documentary, which we might have to talk about another time because it has some interesting stuff and some weird stuff, just like this whole scene, right? But yeah, I can't help but be fascinated. You know, we have Marvel movies that take place in space, with all kinds of out there characters, and people make YouTube channels talking about them. This is like Marvel, but it could be real. It's crazy. I just can't look away. I'm drawn to this stuff. So next, this leads to an explanation that part of what makes the phenomenon more complex than little green men and flying saucers is what we call the occult is involved. And here's where we really just start going in deep. So buckle in. If you're new to this stuff, strap in. It can be a little scary. So a warning to you if you're sensitive to that kind of thing and you don't want to be freaked out right now. So next up, he talks about Hillary Clinton and John Podesta and their statements about releasing UFO files. We're in a transition here with this topic, and very big things are about to happen. Okay, I'm going to pause here because I wondered this the first time. I don't know what Hillary Clinton's stances were or what her statement was. I think this was when she was running for office, potentially. Okay, so from May 2016. Here's New York Times. Hillary Clinton gives UFO buffs hope she will open the X-Files. Jimmy Kimmel asked Hillary Clinton, and she said, you know, there's a new name. Unexplained aerial phenomenon. UAP, that's the latest nomenclature. Hillary has embraced this issue with an absolutely unprecedented level of interest in American politics. So I think they talk about this a little bit, but she made some public statements before other people did, saying if she won, she was going to do things about it. That didn't end up happening, but Trump also, his campaign passed, not his campaign, under his administration, some stuff still happened. So the ufologists and UFO enthusiasts found a way to make something happen, despite Hillary not. So, according to Tom DeLonge, the issue will affect cosmology and religion. We're also going to be shown scientific breakthroughs that will seem like magic to people. Relationships with countries we're not supposed to have relationships with, and defense systems that we've been building secretly with enormous amounts of money for a very long time. Tom DeLonge praises the government for building space defenses in secret and says the young people would probably appreciate it too if they knew. He believes that when people learn about the secret spending, there could be an uproar, but he also believes that if the truth comes out, people will be thankful to have those defenses. He says he was able to get access to important people because he had something to offer, a reach with a younger audience. He was able to convince them by sharing his theories that the phenomenon is not just about UFOs, but exists on a broader spectrum. He also explains that he had a full media plan and good connections to help him execute it, which helped build trust with his government contacts. He says before making media appearances, he was coached to give interviews without divulging certain information. His contacts even set up a fake Newsweek interview so they could analyze his answers and give him feedback before he gives a real interview. So already, there's so many levels and layers from which to come toward this conspiracy here. Tom DeLonge is interacting with people who he thinks are part of the government in part of an effort to spread the word, first by just opening people up to the idea of these things being real and being something bigger than we really understand. There's a couple potential alternative angles at this. Maybe the government's lying to him and using him as a tool to spread pro-military industrial complex propaganda. That's a theory flying around out there. Maybe he's just completely lost it, and these people he's talking to aren't part of the government like he thinks they are, and he's just being taken along for a ride by somebody else. It's an elaborate hoax on Tom DeLonge. Maybe he's even more out there, and none of these things are happening at all, and he's making it up. But you have to wonder. I mean, he left Blink 182, a pretty much infinite cash cow, a household name, touring like crazy, making money hand over fist, one would have to imagine. And he left that to pursue this, which is a big risk, and probably didn't have the revenue stream there like Blink 182 did. So I think whoever he has access to, I think he believes in this stuff because his passion and his energy for it is obvious. So here's what he believes. There's 4 hours here broken down into bullet points. We're on hour 2. That was the first hour. The contents of Secret Machines, which is one of the, I think, the books or the stories that his company, To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, made, is mostly about the subjective human experience of UFO/ET contact, including the perspective of people sworn to secrecy. And note in parentheses here, he's talking about the fiction series, that started with Chasing Shadows, not the non-fiction series. Quotes from Tom DeLonge. Sentences and quotations. Frankly, the stuff I've gotten over the past 2 months that we're going to be putting in book 2 is some pretty scary stuff. It continues. Tom DeLonge would regularly send manuscripts to be approved by his government contacts. He says he doesn't yet have all the information that will go into future books. He knows on a macro level, but he's waiting to learn more progressively. Of course, John Podesta of Podesta Emails fame. So already conspiracy theorist red flags are going off. Podesta was involved with the Clintons. The Clintons are involved with messed up stuff. This could all be part of some big scheme, and Tom DeLonge's just being brought along for the ride. That's one possibility. Next up, with book 2, we're going to get into the oceans, viruses. Parentheses here seems to imply that viruses have an otherworldly origin or were cultivated by otherworldly beings. Radio host Knapp talks and DeLonge acquiesces. Due to the way the secrecy is structured, the number of people who actually have an understanding of the big picture can be counted on fingers of one hand. There is no entity called the government, quote unquote. UFO secrecy is controlled by a complex apparatus that involves private money. When asked if the tactic of involving private companies in UFO research is a way for the government to escape FOIA, Tom DeLonge confirms that it is. FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. So I think they explain this a bit more, but the government is beholden to certain rules, laws. And if the government alone holds all of this information, then a request for it to be shared must be followed. So this is one reason why the report coming up this month to Congress is probably not going to reveal probably not much of anything. That's a possibility because all the interesting tidbits and details are spread out across this apparatus of private companies. That's an explanation anyway. You start to get the feeling here, and this is what I want to be skeptical of and not just jump into. You get this feeling of, the QAnon types. You might believe it, you might not, but They're always 1 week or 1 month away from the big reveal happening. How long do you go on that ride? We might be entering that ride with UFO stuff. Just keep that possibility open as an option if you're an enthusiast, whatever. I think any of us who have been interested in this kind of stuff for any amount of time, we know how to sort of hold our emotions on it a little bit, I think, because it's an endurance sport. To have been following this stuff since the 90s or earlier. And you can get burnt out and lose interest, hop back in, whatever. Next, one of the threads that has been going on for a very long time is that when the first crashes happened, we pooled together intelligence, military, and private industry to get the brightest minds on the question: what do we do and how do we attack this? They've been using private companies or even publicly traded companies. They keep the secret information protected through organizations that are non-governmental. Private companies working under the purview of the Department of Defense are developing their own crafts. But what they're building, they don't really own. DeLonge says he's been advised by top scientists who work 9 months out of the year at Area 51, who have explained to him how the government uses private companies to maintain the UFO cover-up. They may be building things that truly have anti-gravity, but they don't own it, even though it's theirs, kind of. They're developing things on their company's behalf, but they're using government land. It's convoluted. It's an interesting dance. So in Knapp's words, using DeLonge as a proxy for the message gives the government contacts this plausible deniability angle where they can say it's fiction, even though they provided the information themselves. And of course, Podesta works with DeLonge. We know that. And in the leaked emails, a copy of one of DeLonge's stories, when the emails leaked, was in there. So DeLonge's not completely disconnected from a lot of these claims. He is in contact, and he has these people on his payroll, or they work with his company. He has some powerful connections. DeLonge tells a story about how an upcoming teaser will have a silhouetted person speaking to the camera, an engineer/person who worked at Area 51 for decades. This person told him off camera, if someone drives up to you and tells you to get in the car, don't get in the car. He seemed very agitated and said something to the effect of, you're playing with some real serious shit. On the topic of why this guy, why DeLonge, he insisted on telling the entire story. There was an opportunity for him to go to a rare company celebration for employees undertaking secret government technology contracts. He knew exactly who these people were and what they do. I assume he means propulsion and weapons research. He talked to people there and pitched everyone his idea about reversing people's attitude toward the military-industrial complex. He didn't mention UFOs at first, but people seemed interested. He managed to get other meetings. So if that's true, that's a pretty smart angle of attack. So he's kind of taking a gamble. He goes to a party where he knows there's government contracts, and he's kind of saying like, hey, I'm a punk rocker. Let me use my influence with younger people who may tend to be kind of think in different ways, not necessarily be into the whole government defense spending thing. I have an idea to sell a lot of those people on this stuff. From his mind, he's thinking because he thinks this UFO stuff is a big threat. But to them, he's just saying, hey, let me help you guys out, you military contractors. Can you hook me up with somebody and we can do like a pro military industrial complex thing? Didn't even mention UFOs yet. Pretty smart. Next up. One of the meetings took him to a concrete bunker in the middle of the desert where he had to get through various security checkpoints to reach the workplace of 3 engineers working on top secret tech, where he pitched them his ideas. For the end of the meeting, he specifically described the Secret Machines project. He explains that there's been a systematic process where information was disseminated, then invalidated, to acclimate the world progressively. This made sense in the 40s and 50s when the system was put together, but today, with the internet, instantaneous communication, etc., that method of dissemination is ineffective and antiquated, causes people to distrust the government. I mean, distrust of the government over the past few years is definitely at a peak. It's hard to imagine it getting much lower in the US. I'm sure it could, but yeah, they the whole secrecy thing with how information works these days, it's not a lasting model. And again, this could have just landed in some government person's lap. Like, hey, this rock star wants to spread a pro defense spending message. And the government could just say, yeah, feed him some interesting stories, see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can call him crazy. Maybe they're telling him a lot of things that aren't true to begin with. You have to keep this stuff in mind. So he told the person he was talking to that they could have mutually beneficial relationship. He would need advisors, people who would give him weight as he delivers the truth to the public, and the progressive rollout would include a message that would help the government redeem itself for the poor way things have been handled in the past. I mean, DeLonge, if Tom DeLonge did all this stuff, you can't deny he's got passion. He really put himself out there. So I think if this is true, he cares about what he's doing for sure. So he later sent out the prologue of one of the Secret Machines books. For a while, he thought he would never hear back. Eventually, someone called him to let him know he had a meeting with the CIA in DC, close to the Pentagon, with one of his contacts and a new person, both wearing suits. He gave them both the same speech as before. His contact explained to him that this is information the White House is not responsible for, that this is not the kind of initiative it would be able to decide on. Decisions like this are made in secret, in secure rooms, by small groups of people in the know who get to decide when to push the ball down the field. He had a similar meeting with people from NASA. That's when he met the general, quote unquote. So Tom DeLonge has spoken about working his way up to a multi-star general. The meeting supposedly changed the course of the whole endeavor. Hour 3. DeLonge explains his creative process and the way his high-ranking contacts would occasionally dribble out information that he would then incorporate into his manuscripts before they reviewed them. He tells us that one of his contacts told him a story. In the middle of the Cold War, around a time that people believed a nuclear war could break out at any moment, they found a life form. He associated several incidents with this life form or its species, incidents during which nuclear missiles were turned on, put into launch conditions. His source reportedly said, "There are heroes in Russia," in relation to these incidents, referring to Russian officers who decided not to retaliate in response to what looked like U.S. escalation. So something was messing with nuclear systems, and Russia could have responded by retaliating to the U.S., thinking that it was an attack, because that constitutes an attack, right? But they didn't do it. So finding the life form had a radical effect, like something that fell into the world's lap in the midst of increasing nuclear tensions changed the course of history. This extraordinary contact is a very high-ranking person with multiple PhDs, but his identity cannot be revealed. DeLonge asked his contact to find him a group of advisors, which he did. He got experts on space, intelligence, and even bioweapons. DeLonge says he was able to pull off a sort of coup by getting this group working together, like flipping a switch on the way things are done and going the multidisciplinary route. The reason for the secrecy is not that they're maliciously hiding the truth, it's because it's an ongoing task, an ongoing issue. They don't fully understand it yet, which is why they're pouring so much money into it. They keep having breakthroughs that we should be extremely proud of as a nation. So here, like stuff like this, that we should be extremely proud of as a nation. I will admit, as an American, we are due for some good old fashioned, let's get together and believe in ourselves and in each other and feel good. But this proud of as a nation, this patriotism appeal combined with defense spending, it has to raise a little bit of a red flag that maybe the government is trying some experimental approach of winning people over on this defense spend. The U.S. obviously look at the military budget; it's insane. Well, it's not insane if they know the things that DeLong says that they know. Next, he says his project is not about convincing people that the phenomenon is real. It's about explaining why it's been kept secret and why it was a good thing. The quote unquote secret shadow government idea that was painted through things such as the MJ12 documents was not exactly accurate. In reality, things are more fragmented. There are groups in the military doing research and development, analyzing intelligence. The NRO analyzes the entire electromagnetic spectrum of space, and they'll see things buzzing around and doing stuff. They then brainstorm ways to defend against those capabilities and produce new technology in the process. Investigators are also interviewing abductees and looking at cattle mutilations. A very, very small group of people at the top putting it all together. So it's a lot of little groups doing little things, and then just a few people know kind of the bigger picture, according to Tom DeLonge. DeLonge asked his contact if anyone was standing back to look at the big picture, since there are so many different phenomena being reported and investigated. The answer he received was a negative. It's just a grab bag of scientists, and no one's looking at the big picture. So nobody's actually looking at the big picture. He believes that a lot of evidence was gathered in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, but much of that was completely out of reach. He says we don't have some kind of overbearing MJ12 program, rather, it's several disjointed specialized programs. DeLonge asked for someone from the DIA, Department of Internal. What's DIA? DIA meaning. Come across this every so often. DIA, government meaning Defense Intelligence Agency. Got it. Asked for someone from the DIA to get some help on portraying the way crashes were handled. He was told he didn't need to because the people with all the info were in the room with him already. He only realized after the fact that he had been working with major decision makers in relation to the UFO subject. Regarding the existence of MJ12-like group, he says he hasn't actually asked if a group exists or how many members it might have. MJ12, Majestic 12. The people DeLonge is dealing with are not counterintelligence people, they're space intelligence, but he doesn't want to state what they are exactly. Everything DeLonge releases is released with permission from these people. That's the next bullet point. Next, plausible deniability is the way it's always done so as not to scare people. Things like the Roswell crash always have a cover story to leave open the possibility that the event might not have been real. This allows people to mentally process the events and not let it affect their lives. So the stuff that we're about to get into, if you really believe it and let it freak you out, it can affect your life, I think. If you take it completely seriously and let it settle in, this is the kind of thing why Tom DeLonge in another interview said he didn't sleep for like 3 days. Because it's some serious stuff, especially if it's just totally left field. I can give a bit of background. I was raised an evangelical Christian. And I grew up believing things not that different from what Tom DeLonge is about to say. So if hearing somebody talk about that kind of thing, something that will piss you off, you're setting yourself up to get off here. But I'm reading what Tom DeLonge says, okay? It's from Tom DeLonge. Anyways, he believes revealing the truth will draw people towards space. He says we'll have a comprehensive space program that is part defense, part exploration, and that people will want to get involved. exactly like when more people started joining the army directly after 9/11. When people know the stakes, they'll want to be a part of it. So this kind of excites me. I like I like where DeLonge's coming from here, where he believes this stuff. And he says, let's go to space. Let's become an interstellar species. Let's hedge our bets. Let's not just rely on Earth panning out. An asteroid could hit us. Some crazy aliens could kill us, you know? The more we spread out, the more advanced we get, the more options we have for survival as a species. The solar system's not going to last forever. So if we want to outlive the solar system, we got to get pumping. We got to get going, guys. I respect that part, Tom DeLonge's whole situation. He believed it. He did something about it, and he went out and said, "Let's get cracking. Let's go to space. Let's convince young people to want to be astronauts and want to build spaceships. And you know, even if they're just the one installing the rivets, let's get people excited again and have a reason bigger than themselves to be alive." I think we genuinely need something like that. And if it's not just killing other people, if it's going to space, then I'm all for it. Next up. Yes, we have cracked gravity and we are building machinery that is anti gravity. And yes, I was told that it's a big deal. The exact term that is used by DeLonge's government contacts is the others. So we're getting into it now. It's not the phenomenon, it's not aliens. The way it was explained to him is that they are gods with a little g. So when we get into this kind of stuff, I get shivers. I don't know why, because I try to not believe. Like I don't want to get roped in, but I'm sensitive. Whenever I start talking about aliens and higher powers and stuff, if I get too excited, I start like trembling. So I'm getting shivers right now. Keep an eye out behind me. Look out for aliens, okay? And let me know if they're coming. The entire UFO phenomenon is about multiple gods that fight amongst themselves and by design factionalize mankind into different religions to step back and let us fight each other because it has other things it wants to accomplish and we don't notice them because we're too involved fighting with each other. Our government knows that. It knows that the others are instigating wars among mankind. He goes on to say that if you look at the stories of gods coming down to earth, performing various feats, it's all true. I don't know if it's all true. I don't know if any of it's true. It's compelling, though, isn't it? It's compelling. It's interesting as a story. It's scary. It can be scary. Humanity is facing off against things so advanced that we call them gods with a little g. They just exist on a completely different level of everything. Next up, government is very aware that this intelligence is pinning different countries against each other based on religion on purpose, and it's a scary scenario. It's a multiple front war that we're fighting because we have to worry about each other and we have to worry about the others. This to me is a little bit, oddly enough, uplifting because humanity can come together and we can overcome something bigger or we can die trying. I'd rather do that than us just kill each other for no reason. And I prefer this to the narratives that are saying, well, people who believe XYZ are evil. I prefer this. In a way, it gives me hope. Okay. The reason for the secrecy is we don't want everyone knowing our vulnerabilities, and we don't want everyone knowing about the advances we've made to protect everybody against multiple adversaries. Intelligence agencies have also been trying to figure out who is being manipulated as a country more than the others. He suggests that when Bush named different countries as an axis of evil, that was the government making a blanket statement that they're really concerned about these areas. You remember the axis of evil, right? They're concerned about these areas at that time being affected by manipulation from quote unquote the others. I don't know. Maybe one day they will spin all of that, or is spin the right word, all of that whole mess, the Iraq war stuff. Maybe they were targeting very specific places important to the others. But I don't know if you can justify those deaths of civilians. And this is where I start to like, okay, is Tom DeLonge being taken for a ride by the pro military industrial complex machine? And maybe they're spreading multiple little stories like this around, target a lot of different population groups to try to bring them in on being pro defense spending. Always 1 foot kind of very not trusting of this kind of stuff, at least. So next, the others, by design or maybe by accident, happen to crash very advanced pieces of technology in the country's borders so they can make better weapons to fight bigger wars. And we're not the only ones that have had a crash. So we don't know what other technology other places may have. When we make big statements about North Korea, about Iran, or about China, it's because we are aware that those places are being manipulated and have very advanced technologies now. So we're trying to keep everyone calm and not initiate a conflict. So we're constantly looking over our shoulder, and in the middle of that, trying to tell people. DeLonge says the reason technology seems to have fallen into our laps was, according to a quote from one of his sources, potentially just to see who's stronger. We don't know for sure why it happened, and it's the way those guys have to think. It's like the multi-level chess game. China's defense budget has quadrupled in the past few years. They believe it's related to the manipulation. That's pretty scary. That these forces, if it's real, could potentially be manipulating other countries. And it could all lead to just more wars amongst each other instead of uniting us. So he says that he has, as of 2 weeks ago, confirmation that cattle mutilations are absolutely related to the phenomenon. He mentions a recent incident where a large number of elk were found with parts of their bodies cored out and no blood at all. I'm just getting like constant shivers down my spine. I don't like that I'm sitting with my back to a room. I'm starting to enter that, getting a little late here. I'm getting a little worked up. It just weirds me out. That's why I can't look away. While we're kept distracted and busy, believing in different gods and fighting, these things are zipping around, doing weird things with animals, and abducting people. They're trying to accomplish something. He also puts out theory that the others are interested in the emotional side of things, that they're interested in the emotions generated by war. It's hard to think of, but it's still energy. I don't know what I think about that. That's obviously just a theory, right? Well, what is any of this? Referring to Hillary Clinton's statements, he thinks it's going to be hard to put out all the UFO files without releasing things that are a national security issue because the release of any information is in itself an act of war. It's a war. It gets hot at times, and it's something they deal with every single day. Yeah. What are you going to do? What's going to happen when all of this stuff becomes public? Scary to think about. The others, they operate under the assumption that most people don't know they exist. Once we declare it a war against them, things are going to change, potentially, under this whole Tom DeLonge theory. So next, there was an alert 36 months ago that nuclear weapons that make up the tip of the spear of NATO's nuclear arsenal are being simultaneously shut down in the ocean by UFOs. There are mechanisms out in space that keep these weapons online, and those mechanisms were being shut down too. He knows somebody who had to go to a very secure location and was tasked with investigating these events. The team that was put together to investigate this was actually 2 inexperienced first-year soldiers. The hope was that they wouldn't be able to come back with a conclusive answer when other NATO members came and started asking questions to keep the issue covered up. So that kind of that's a similar explanation as to why Bob Lazar would have been hired, if you know that story, the documentary on Netflix. Not saying everything he's saying is real or true, but that could be a similar theory with that story where they hired Bob Lazar because he was young, not an established widely known expert of any kind, and they dumped all this information on him and asked him to reverse engineer UFO. Of course, George Knapp is also connected. The person hosting this radio show with Tom DeLonge is also connected to Bob Lazar. So maybe all of this is springing up out of UFO enthusiasts surrounding Bob Lazar, if not Bob Lazar himself. I'm just thinking other options. George Knapp is involved. Tom DeLonge becomes interested. They get in contact with Tom DeLonge. Tom DeLonge uses his network to then reach higher levels. And all of this interest, this resurgence in interest, is just bubbling up out of this network of UFO enthusiasts. Maybe it will amount to nothing. Just have to keep these options in mind here. George Knapp wonders if the technology could be Russian. Tom DeLonge says he's actually going to talk about this in an upcoming docuseries. He says there are major advancements that Russia has, that China has, and that we have based on technology that was recovered either by design or by accident. Personally, from everything I'm hearing, it looks like it was given by design, once again, to see who is the strongest. The implication is that the others are feeding the war and waiting for the prevailing faction to come out victorious. There's a very, very strong link between what people think demons are from the Bible and other religions and the UFO phenomenon. What you have is something that doesn't like man, as in humanity, and either feels jealous of or has some kind of plan for what man is to be. That just makes it that much worse when you think about it. So yeah, that's a biblical concept that certain angels got jealous of humanity, or demons, they're jealous of humanity. Celestial creatures are jealous of the biblical God's plan for humanity. So this is where I think Tom DeLonge loses a lot of people. Because if you're religious, you're a Christian or a Muslim or whatever, and you hear your faith being compared to aliens, which you might think is a crackpot theory, you're going to be pissed off. If you're not religious or you have a bad experience with religion, plenty of people do. There's plenty of them out there. And good reasons in many cases to have bad experiences with religion. If you're starting to get interested in, okay, what are these UFOs? And it comes back to this religion thing, then you're like, damn it, not again. Right? And so I think people get turned off by all this stuff. But you have to, or I try to think of it, okay, erase what I know about these things and think, if these things did exist, these creatures that are this far ahead of us and they've been visiting us throughout history, yeah, the people at that time, they wouldn't quite understand what they're encountering. They would take pieces of the information and turn them into gods. This is why a lot of people compare what a lot of our religions based on this. If you subscribe to the Tom DeLonge way of looking at things, our religions are like those cargo cults of the tribes who saw planes before having any other exposure to them and worshipped them as gods, basically. So that's kind of what our religions are. It's not. So if these creatures are there, if these stories are true and they've been there for this long, it's not that far-fetched to think that our religions are connected to them in some way. And then you get shows like Ancient Aliens and whatnot. Maybe that's all part of this rollout of disclosures, opening people up to these ideas. So you're just so desensitized to them that you're like, sure, why not? Weird things happen. And that's kind of where I think a lot of people are getting. So quote from one of his advisors: would the link of aliens creating man, who then created God to keep us in our place, be something worth keeping secret? Mind you, secret with a K, which is how we do secret machines. They spelled secret with a K. I think so. We're talking about the biggest institutions on the planet and the world's major religions. It's bigger than just the big bad US government. And going back to the Greeks, and including Russians and Germans, And then in brackets, they say they might have skipped a line because it just goes to make it sufficiently global across centuries. Maybe evidence of disappeared ancient cultures, such as Easter Island, the Maya, the Inca. That's evidence of what happened to those that did not obey, thus encouraging the secret to be kept. And could the story evolve from how different groups of men exploited this technology to see how the entire secret is uncovered? So, I'm getting tingles in my spine. I don't know why. I just need to take a little breather here. Maybe it's how I'm sitting. It's the room behind me. I need to sit against a wall so I feel safe. Rewriting world history and shattering many of our most well regarded holy institutions, except this time, when they come to wipe us out like the other ones, we are actually ready for them. That readiness is another example why things have been kept quiet for so long and has been a strange international partnership. That, come on, if we defeat these space demons, that's pretty awesome. Have you ever played Doom? Defeating space demons is badass. So, sure, we can become scared by this. If this turns out to be true, you can get scared, I guess. But even better, let's not give up. Let's fight this thing, right? We've been training for this. This is what we've been watching Alien and Predator and playing Doom and playing all those kinds of games. This is what we've been preparing for. Alien isolation happening. Not quite alien isolation, So we think there's this big conspiracy, but really this is the sequence of events. In Germany, they had some crashes. They started doing some advanced work in World War II and after World War II. We had some crashes. Russia had some crashes. Maybe China. We covered the whole thing up. No one really knows about it. But what we really did is we went to these really secret places underground, places that are out in Nevada and all around the world, and started working like crazy with the brightest minds and huge amounts of money, with passion and with resilience, and with everything at our disposal to come up with a way to protect everybody. You have to kind of like that optimism from Tom DeLonge. We've been working to save humanity for the past several decades since this stuff started coming out, according to Tom DeLonge. He says he believes the psyops that have been played on people were designed to ensure that the others don't know what humanity knows about them. It's all been a big chess game, so the others don't know how far along we've gotten to fight back. When people find out about this, they're going to lose a lot of their cynicism about the government. That neatly ties in a bow an answer to a lot of these questions, like why keep it a secret? Why haven't the aliens contacted us? I always tended to think, these advanced civilizations would likely be more ethical than us. But this is another option. They're evil space demons. He doesn't say this, but a lot of people who subscribe to this theory also think there are good versions of the space demons, the space angels, basically. If you're still with me, bless you, because I know it's weird, and this stuff's about 2 years old. So if you're interested in this stuff at all, you've probably read it. But responding to a caller on the radio show about his CE5 experience, he mentions an experiencer that Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée is really interesting. And I'll have to talk about him sometime. I mostly like Jacques Vallée's theories. And that's kind of direction I've been leaning. If just for my own reasons, my own opinions, that's kind of his theories line up with where I'm going. Anyways, Jacques Vallée brought to the Pentagon, who is able to make a UFO appear on command. He says he knows a person who is able to do it as well, and he hopes to show some footage in the upcoming documentary. Next, the orbs that appear when you do the CE5 meditation are these little machines, drones or whatever, that just sit there and wait for somebody to do that meditation protocol, and then it senses the frequency of somebody wanting to see it, and it decloaks itself for people to see. Note, he doesn't recommend summoning these orbs. Yikes. So they're just always floating around waiting for you to summon them with your CE5 meditation energy. It's out there stuff. Okay? That's what I've been saying the whole video. It's out there stuff. It's really out there. So DeLonge says he asked his advisors if consciousness has a relationship to gravity. He doesn't state what the answer is, but he mentions something about the detection of gravitational waves that was recently in the press. His advisors told him this breakthrough would open doors for him. Reagan's SDI. So what was SDI? Special Defense Initiative or something? Yeah, Strategic Defense Initiative. Nicknamed the Star Wars program. A missile defense system intended to protect the United States from attack by ballistic strategic nuclear weapons. This is the making of a good conspiracy theory. It's taking little pieces of real life. It's trying to put them together. Okay, so nuclear weapons are bad for aliens. That's why we've been spending so much money on nuclear weapons. If it's true, again, it makes you more optimistic for humanity. We're pulling together to protect human life. We're not just making all these nuclear weapons to potentially kill other people. I'd like to believe that part at least. And then finally, there are good gods. Yeah, so he gets into this. There are good lowercase g gods and bad lowercase g gods, aliens or whatever, interdimensional beings, interstellar, alien, whatever you want to call them. So, and their interactions have been well documented throughout history. Well documented, quote unquote. He says he has detailed documentation on different figures from Sumer in ancient Greece that communicated with these quote unquote gods. Currently, there are three main monotheistic faiths, and the rivalry between them is by design. Humans have a tendency to gather religiously as long as there is a priestly class, meaning people will join religions as long as there is a leader or hero figure to follow. DeLonge and his group want to warn the world not to fall for the deception. Yeah. And in Revelation in the Bible, the Antichrist is followed as such a near religious figure. So don't fall for the deception, says Tom DeLonge. I find it all fascinating. I'm freaked out. Whether I fully believe it or not, I don't really know, but I'm still tingling on my back. So I'm going to end it here and go probably not sleep very well. Thank you for joining me this week. I hope the audio comes out okay. If so, I'm just going to pop this up real quick. And do me the favor of subscribing if you watch this and if you like it. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Call me crazy. Do whatever you want to do, just as long as you watch. Hey, let's treat each other well, okay? We have a big war coming up, by the sounds of things, if Tom DeLonge is to be believed. So let's be righteous to each other and gather the forces, fight the forces of evil, and overcome the others. Let's do it. I believe in us. Okay. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.